I'm Chey, and I like when people make instruments squingle boingle real good. Ready? Rollin'. I love music. It is the biggest part of my life. It is one of my biggest passions in life. Always has been, always will be. And I wanted to make a video talking about why, because I think a lot of people out there can probably relate. And it's just something I love talking about. If you spent longer than 2 minutes in my presence or just on this channel, you know that. A quick disclaimer though. I'm not trying to place myself as more special than anybody when I talk about music's importance to me, or that I'm somehow higher on the totem pole than any person who loves music. I just genuinely love music, even though I don't do the words real good, and I want to talk about it. For a while I wanted to script this video, but then I realized that was probably a waste of time because I have spent most of my life talking about music, so why would I need a script? Plus, I don't follow scripts very well. Never have. Sorry to all my past theater clubs and directors. I want to make a lot more music-centered content on this channel, but I felt like this was a good place to start. A setting up the backstory, the origin story, if you will. So while I could wax poetic about everything I love in music and all the bands I love, that's gonna come later, though some bands are probably more obvious than others. In this video, I'm mainly going to cover where my love of music came from, how I grew up with music, and generally why it's important to me. So let's start back at the beginning. Ever since I can remember, music has played an important role in my life. Music has been implanted in my blood. Even before I was born, way before I was born, my mom has always been obsessed with music. And still is to this day, which will be the subject of another video later. Even before I was born, she always had music playing, not just in one form. In every single room of her house, she would have different music playing. So the TV would be on MTV. This was in the 80s. The radio would be on a country station. She'd have a metal vinyl record playing in the kitchen. Maybe not in the kitchen, but you get my point. My aunts and uncles have corroborated this. She has always been crazy about music. So when I came along, I was primed and ready for that same sort of passion and love being passed down to me. The story goes that she actually carried me out of the hospital in her metal battle jacket, because she's just that awesome. She also didn't sing me lullabies to sing me to sleep. She sang me Metallica and mostly Iron Maiden. My favorites, if you're curious, were Enter Sandman and Number of the Beast. Some of my earliest memories are dancing along to music before I really had a strong, hefty vocabulary. I would be sitting in the truck or the car with my mom or dad, and they always had music playing. And how I would dance is by sucking in and pushing out my stomach along to the beat. It's kind of hard to describe, but just imagine like... And that's how I would dance. But at least I was on beat. I learned beat and rhythm real early, and that is a theme that has pervaded throughout my life. I've always been able to keep a rhythm, to keep a beat unnaturally well, and I sort of credit that as being the catalyst to starting that, to priming my ears. My mom has always jokingly, not jokingly, said that she raised me to be a drummer. She wants me to be a drummer so badly. And a lot of my musician friends hate me for it because they're like, man, I wish my mom wished I was a drummer. She wishes I was anything else. Also, forgive this baby hair right here. I just cut my bangs last night, so my hair is misbehaving. Anyway, I grew up in a house of music. My dad was always in the barn with his radio cranked up as loud as it would go on the classic rock station. And my mom always had music playing in the house, just like when she was younger. So I grew up watching classic videos on MTV, listening to old vinyl, old cassettes. There's music on all the time, everywhere. My brain was just flooded with it, and I loved it. I used to sit in my room and listen through the wall, the thumping of the bass of the classic rock station that my dad would listen to. My ears became so prepped to that still, to this day, I can sit on that bed and just listen through the wall and I can tell you what song it is. Even though I can't hear the words, just by listening to the beat and the dun, I can tell you exactly what song it is. With a 90% success rate. They're starting to play newer stuff that I didn't grow up listening to. But still, I believe that's why I prefer lower tones compared to higher frequencies. I know a lot of audio engineers are like, oh, muddy tones, bass tones, blah, blah. I love that stuff. And I fully blame sitting here and listening to those songs over and over, devouring them that way. So I grew up listening to music, constantly.
Oh, stop it!
What are you doing? But that's not enough to make music a passion. So why is it still a passion to this day? Why am I constantly wearing band merch? Why is my room covered in a bunch of band merch? Why do I have so many vinyl? So many CDs? So many t-shirts? It's because music was not only a pastime or a passion for me growing up. So growing up, music became an escape, a best friend, and a teacher, and a translator. I'll start with escape because I think it's the easiest to explain, and it sort of ties into the best friend aspect. Music as an escape. I think a lot of people use it for this purpose. Just like any sort of media can be used for this purpose. Movies, TV shows, books, music, it all falls under the category of, for the moment, transporting you to another space, time, another world, even if just for a few minutes. And growing up, I utilized this greatly. I did not have the best extended family life growing up. A lot of my family members were older, so there was a lot of death, unfortunately, in my family. Also, just a lot of general drama that comes with having a big family. And since there was a lot of dark and heavy stuff going on, I was too young to truly understand how to work through that, or even comprehend doing emotional work to process it, and music became an escape for that. Instead of listening to the same family drama 1,000 times, or hearing about the latest anxiety-inducing tidbit about what someone was doing. Also, I didn't have the greatest time in school. I was gifted ADHD, and I had a lot of acquaintances, a lot of friends, but not a lot of close friends. I'm outgoing, but I was never extremely outgoing. I was sort of a 60% extrovert, 40% introvert. Because I had a lot of stuff going on with my family and in school, a lot of times I just wanted to be home and be by myself and decompress. I didn't know that's how to word it at the time, but that's what I wanted. Music helped me do that. I talked about this in my ADHD video as well, but I grew up writing all the time. As much as I listened to music. Ever since I can remember, I've been writing stories. And I partly attribute that to music as much as I attribute my love of writing to loving music. Because what else is music but storytelling? So in using that escapism, I would find myself falling into the stories that music told, being drawn into the lyrics, and more so being drawn into the stories of the artists themselves. I don't know why, but I've always been interested in the people behind the music and the process. But I was obsessed with the stories that music told and how they told those stories, and the stories of the people behind it. I just always remember thinking it was such a fascinating process of how the song was conceptualized, why the people wrote it, why the people did what they did, and then how it came out on the other side and the story that it was telling. Just so many puzzle pieces fitting together that was a treasure trove to explore. Therefore, I believe the passions for writing and music just fed into each other. Because I believe I understood, even if I couldn't put it into words, how storytelling was used as an escape, and then how that translated into music. Music as a best friend. This one is also sort of self-explanatory, because I think it's the case for a lot of people, especially young emos like I was. Now, I was lucky, because I could never say, like a lot of stereotypical emo kids, like, my parents don't get me, my parents hate my music, blah 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 blah. I was raised by a mother who was a metalhead, an original OG metalhead. Like, she was there for Metallica's first album and was a fan. Is that I was very lucky when I started finding my own music, because for so long, like a lot of other kids, I had my parents' music taste based on what they played, which was old classic rock or metal. But then when I was about in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I started finding my own music taste. More modern rock, metalcore, metal. This was when Black Veil Brides was huge. In being exposed to them and similar bands, I found a band that I really, really loved, which was Asking Alexandria. Now this was during their crabcore days. And if you understand the meaning of that term, you may qualify for financial compensation. Asking Alexandria was my gateway into discovering more and more of my own music taste and that whole genre. And yes, this poster has been on my wall since 2014. I got it out of a Guitar World magazine, I think, and it's got Ben Bruce, Cam Little, and Sam Betley on it. And then back here, I have an original promo ad from Death to Destiny. It says coming August 6th. That's how long it's been here. I was very lucky though, because as I began sharing all these bands I was discovering, becoming a little emo, dressing all in black, the heavy eyeliner, the whole 9 yards, listening to Screamo, I never felt outcasted by my parents. My mom did the exact opposite. She was very interested in all the bands I was listening to. She would encourage me to like show her different songs. She would ask me if shows were coming up. She wanted to know everything about them that I was interested in. I felt lucky then, and I know that I am very lucky for that sort of love and encouragement. But even though I had that, I live in Yeeville, and there were not a lot of emos or people of that sort of culture at my school. And if they were all older than me and didn't really hang out with me besides my best friend, Angel, who has been a little emo with me for forever. And my #1 concert buddy, forever and always. Angel, thank you for so many years of becoming my impromptu bodyguard at shows. Spending a lot of late nights eating really terrible, greasy fast food and trying to remember where we parked our car. You're the best. It's the same sort of story where I had friends, but even more so, I wasn't close with them because I didn't really have anything in common with the people in my grade. They were friendly with me at school. I was bullied some, but for the most part, it was more of a, I hate to say ignorance, willing ignoring of me. It wasn't outright shoving me into lockers or something like that. It was more of just, she's weird, don't really include her, kind of thing. Rarely were people outright mean, and I count myself, again, lucky on that part. Hello, editing Chey here because I just remembered a fun tidbit from back in the day. I had my headphones in all the time in school. Whenever we weren't in class, as soon as that bell rang to do a study break or to switch classes, I had my headphones in, my earbuds in, every single moment that I was able to. And apparently this did not go unnoticed because for our senior year we were allowed to make like a senior video full of like skits and pranks, poking loving fun at our school because it was a K-12 school and the teachers we had known for years. So we made a bunch of skits and all that. I was in so many of the skits, and my running gag that other people in my class came up with is that I would be in every single scene with my headphones in. Even if I wasn't relevant, I would be in the skits of classes I never even took with my headphones on because that's just how I was seen. All the time. Being left out, especially at that age where your hormones are going crazy, hurts. It sucks. When you have no one, you can relate to or hang out with or share those feelings with. But you know who did understand? Music. Since I was getting older and getting more emotional depth, I started, of course, relating to the emo lyrics, and found myself using it as a friend to fill the gaps where real friends were not. Even more than that, music has been a way for me to meet some of my best friends. Of course, I talked about Angel. One of the big things that we did in building our friendship being youngins is sharing an earbud on the bus all the time. Ah, blissful younger days. But a concert is also how I met one of my best friends in the world, Summer. I went to the Of Mice and Men, A Day to Remember show in 2012, 2013 in Nashville. I think they were co-headliners. I'll try and find the lineup for that tour and post the poster of it. I was a young kid, 13, 14 years old. I was hanging out in the lounge area between sets of Mice and Men and A Day to Remember. And all of a sudden, this nervous girl my age approached me and asked if I had seen one of the band members hanging out around the area. Because it was a small venue, so sometimes the band members would come and chill at the merch table. She wanted a picture and an autograph. And I told her, no, I hadn't seen him, but we can go look around, see if he's, hanging out. And so, we went looking. We actually did find him. We didn't get to have an autograph or a picture because he was leaving to go somewhere else, but we did get to say hi. And we still laugh about it to this day. But afterwards, after the show, she found me, and we started talking, exchanged numbers, started texting back and forth of our mutual love of the bands, and just over time, became the best of friends, and we're still really close to this day. And I probably never would have met her if I didn't go to that show. And I have many stories of meeting other people the same way, including Michelle. Michelle I met my sophomore year at Georgetown. I believe it was my sophomore year. Metalheads at Georgetown are, again, in a minority. I remember walking into my philosophy class, and I noticed her, because she was dressed like me. All black, she had black hair, and she had serious RBF. But she was wearing like a metal band t-shirt, and immediately I thought in my head, I have to sit next to this girl. It was like, one of us, one of us. So I went and sat next to her, and I don't remember if it was that class or the next, but eventually she turned to me, and I think she said she liked my t-shirt, but we struck up a conversation and got to talking about Whitechapel, because I'm from Tennessee. And from then on, we just sat next to each other, exchanged numbers, bonded over music, and became really good friends. Music has been a best friend to me when I didn't really have any, but also became a magnet for finding friends that I may have otherwise never have run across. Music as a teacher. As I said, I grew up in Yeeville, very small rural town. Not a lot of diversity here. I don't even think I met someone of a different faith until I was in high school and went to a kind of retreat in DC. Of course, we have different races here, but it's mostly white or African American. Therefore, music was a lot of how I learned about the world, about experiences that were different than my own. And thank goodness to my mom for never having a limit on the music that she consumed. If it was music, she listened to it. So I didn't just grow up listening to the typical classic rock bands. It wasn't just those. I was lucky enough to also grow up listening to reggae, 90s hip-hop, punk, jazz, soul, you name it. By 5 years old, I was already listening to music like NWA's Straight Outta Compton. You get the idea. Listening to such an array of music and artists like that allowed me to learn about the world and experiences that were vastly different than my own, and helped me learn early on about the world. I feel like a lot of people can relate to this, probably now more than ever, because we have easier access to more music than ever before. And thank goodness we do have more companies, more labels pushing diverse artists to share their experience and their stories. But there's always space and room for more. Now we're to the most important part, music as a translator. All of my life I have had problems putting my emotions into words. I even just had trouble there, obviously. I have always described my emotions as more physical sensations, an ache in my chest, a tingling in my fingers. I have a really hard time recognizing and describing emotions. An early warning sign of ADHD that I didn't know at the time, but understand now. While I had a hard time explaining my emotions, I would listen to music and I would be like, that's exactly how I'm feeling. Again, this is something that I believe everybody who loves music can relate to. You listen to a song and they talk about something that you felt, you just never knew how to put in words, but they do. I began to utilize music for a lot of that. Music became a translator for me to help figure out how I was feeling, and sometimes why I was feeling that way. But I would argue its most important part was letting me know that I wasn't alone. Because I believe a lot of people feel that way. You feel a certain thing and you're like, oh, is it only me? And then you hear a song and you're like, no, somebody else feels that way. But for me, it was so validating and important because I had no idea how to verbalize what I was feeling or really what I was feeling. And sometimes I felt crazy for it. Like Error 404. But then I would hear someone talk about it in a song and it would not only help me discern what I was feeling, it was something I could look at and be like, okay, so even though I don't know how to put it into words, someone else does know what I'm talking about. I'm not crazy. And on that theme, I have always had a intense reaction to music. I sort of explained this again in my ADHD video, but it's more relevant here. Throughout my entire life, whenever I'm listening to music, I could hear sound. It doesn't matter if it's a guitar riff, it's a note on the bass, it's the way a singer's vocal inflection goes, or it could be the entire song. That sound will send up a visceral reaction in me. I don't know how else to describe it except it's like an adrenaline rush, just a shot of adrenaline. And I want to scream, I want to dance, I just want to... except much faster. And this really, really manifested at concerts. I would go crazy at concerts, just losing my mind, moving and screaming my heart out, just thrashing around, not even in a mosh pit. Even at a Taylor Swift concert, which yes, I did attend when I was younger, and no, I'm not ashamed of it. It was the Fearless Tour, if you're curious. And it was at these concerts that I began to realize how weird I was in comparison to other people. Because a lot of people have intense reactions to music where they get excited to see their favorite artist, they dance, they may scream the lyrics. But for me, it was like this no matter where I was. Even if it was a band I never heard of, an opening act, say, I would end up acting this way. The same exact way for an artist that I was really into. And I realized, as I started going to shows, that other people did not do this. But I would always, even if I didn't know the artist, end up getting this shot of adrenaline and just have to move and sing and release a ton of energy that suddenly boiled up inside of me. I never really noticed it when I was listening to music in private or with my parents, because for obvious reasons, no one to compare it to. I just thought my parents were too old to act that way. I didn't think much of it. But at shows, I would be thrashing around, releasing all this energy, and I would notice that other people were just kind of chilling. Even in metal shows. I started reining it in, because I was like, this is weird, there is something wrong with me. I thought there is just something off in my brain. There is something odd with me. I don't know why I have this intense, like, adrenaline rush when it comes to certain songs or certain sounds. I can't describe it. It's just, I'm weird. I'm weird. I didn't know about ADHD or stimming at the time. I didn't know about stimming until, like, a year ago. Now I know that all I was doing was stimming, that music is my ultimate stim. But I did notice a trend in the artists that I love. The artists I loved the most were passionate, especially live, about their music. Bob Seger, my favorite artist of all time. Always has been, always will be. Love Bob Seger. If you listen to any of his live recordings, and I don't usually like live recordings, but his live Bullet album is my favorite album of all time. You can hear how passionate he is about his music, how much he loves it. And that's infectious. Especially to someone like me, because I hadn't seen anyone act about music the same way that I did. That was the closest that I have ever come. And of course it made more sense to me because he's actually the one performing it and singing it. But in terms of someone in the crowd, I had never seen that. In comes Beartooth. I've liked Beartooth ever since the Aggressive album came out, but I didn't get into Beartooth until, I'd say, Disease, shortly before Disease came out. The single, not even the full album. And started watching the backlog of their music videos. This was also at a time in my life where I was dealing with a lot of emotional distress, I would say, more so than almost any point in my entire life. But I was watching the video for Sick of Me, and I heard Caleb talk about something that absolutely changed my life. First of all, how he talked about depression and mental issues and anxiety. He was the first person that I had ever heard talk about it as an ongoing battle, not just something that it would get better, like a finite ending. He talked about, you have to fight it every day, and it is an effort, but it's worth the effort to keep going. And growing up in the emo scene, the metalcore scene, I never heard that. I always heard it as in, it'll get better, it'll end one day, you'll be happy again. And so it made me feel crazy for still having these issues. Caleb in that video was the first person in that scene that I had heard personally talk about it as an ongoing thing. That captured my attention, but then the next thing absolutely blew me away. He talked about his love of music, and the way he talked about his love of music is the exact way that I felt, the way that I feel, and I had never heard that before. He talked about music has been implanted in his body, and when he goes on stage, everything just goes away. And that really struck me. Fast forward to October 2018, the night that changed my life forever. I saw Beartooth live for the first time. I had a broken foot. I ended up getting ADA seats on the balcony, thanks to a lady who vouched for me. Also, Caleb threatened me that if he saw me in GA, he would drag me out. Anyway, they came on stage to Bad Listener, and I was frozen, watching them. I actually wrote a 20-page paper about this as a final for my creative writing course. That's how life-changing this experience was. Watching them come and perform on stage, the entire band, but especially Caleb, he was thrashing around, putting his all into it the same way that I always have when I'm at concerts, or listening to music, or stemming. I was stunned, because I have never seen someone react the same way that I do to music like that, ever. It blew my mind, and I was like, this guy gets it. I remember standing in the balcony, unable to move, even though I wanted to be thrashing around, just saying over and over, he gets it, he gets it, he gets it. And at the time, being a young adult in college, I was questioning my path in life, what I wanted to do. I had always wanted to work in music, do something with music. But, being naive as I was, I figured there was no real job in music except for being a performer. And that was never going to happen. but I also attributed that as a childish wish tied to my weirdness in the intensity and the way that I responded to music. I already thought I was weird for how I responded, how I reacted with music. And so I shrugged off my dreams of working in music as part of my being weird and I need to get serious and find a stable job. Like, Chey, you're just weird. It's something you're passionate about, but focus on getting a real job. Not something that your emotions play into. But watching Caleb on stage, levee breaking for me. Because it all clicked. I was like, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. He gets it. He totally gets it. It was like watching myself if I was able to perform on stage. That's how I would have been acting. That's how I felt up in the balcony. It's how I felt at every show I've ever been to, or every song I've loved. That kind of intensity. And I knew then that I wanted to work in music some way, somehow. But I didn't start searching for a job in music right away. It did mark a turning point in my curriculum at Georgetown to be more music focused. I even became a writer for Georgetown's radio station, and a writer for the Georgetown Voice known as The Political Punk, writing articles that were based in music but also cross-sectioned with politics. I left my international politics major and changed over to history. I was debating on government, but when I brought up that I wanted to do a thesis about the Clash and the importance of protest music, they basically almost laughed at me. They were like, that's not our department. No matter though, because I went straight over to the history department, brought up the same premise, and they absolutely loved it. So I said, I'm going with you guys, because I want to write a thesis about the Clash, and my love of music. Even my professor in Latin American history noticed me because of my love of music. My Latin American history class was about 100, maybe 200 person class, and I always sat at the same spot in the very back row of the lecture hall. And part of my reputation in college was wearing a different band t-shirt every single day. Yes, I have that many. Well, one day, at our discussion section, which is basically a smaller portion of the class getting together to discuss that week's lectures, he was heading the discussion. I was the first one into the discussion room, and he said, hey, how are you? What's your name? We made small talk. I said, I'm Cheyenne. And he said, yeah, I recognize you. You sit at the back of the class, and you're always wearing those really great heavy metal t-shirts. Excuse me? How cool is that? And I said, yes, that is me. And I think at the time I was wearing like a Slipknot t-shirt. For context, our final paper for the class, our final exam, was to be on a topic about anything in Latin American history that we wanted it to be. And so after I confirmed that yes, it was me in those great heavy metal t-shirts, he looked at me and he said, are you a fan of Sepultura? And I said, yes. And he said, do you want to write your final paper about them? And I said, can I? Please? Can I? Please? 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 Can I? And he said, abso-freaking-lutely. Professor McCann, you're the absolute coolest. If you have him at Georgetown, or if you know anybody at Georgetown, Professor McCann is amazing. I will always remember him. You were so cool for letting me do that. So sick of you. Fast forward 2 years later, I'm about to graduate from Georgetown. It's also during the pandemic. Caleb started a Twitch channel. So did Neil Westfall from A Day to Remember. And I would casually talk to them because they were smaller Twitch channels. I'm not saying we were best friends or anybody, but I was a regular to their Twitch streams. And I talked to them about, my love and passion for music. Caleb and I talked about it several times. I was also in the preliminary stages of being tested for ADHD. I was almost having an anxiety attack about it during one of Caleb's streams, and I mentioned it to someone, and Caleb took like a whole 5 minutes, paused whatever he was doing and talked to me about ADHD, because it turns out he was diagnosed with ADHD when he was a really young child and has been treated for it ever since. And he was like, there's nothing wrong with you, you're okay, you just have to find your thing, and when you find your thing, you're set. And he's like, my thing is music. I was like, my thing's music too, man. I get it. I can't make music like you do. In the same capacity, music is my thing. It's what I've always gotten. It's what I've always loved. And it just really calmed me down and validated me, and I'm tearing up now just thinking of it. I don't think he'll ever know how much it meant to me that he took the time to do that. After talking to Caleb and Neil a couple times, I realized that there's a lot of jobs in music. There's a lot that I could do in music. And I became interested in audio engineering. I brought up a couple of different schools that I was looking at to Caleb, and Blackbird came up. And I remember Caleb being like, Blackbird has a school? Dude, go to Blackbird. And Caleb, being one of my favorite engineers, I took it seriously. Also, they recorded an album there, which is amazing. I called Blackbird, talked to them, and then when I decided to put in my application, I called my mom and I told her. I said, I put in my application, I made my deposit, I'm going to Blackbird. She said, you know, I didn't want to push you, I didn't want to influence you, but I always knew that you'd end up working in music somehow. I'm not the richest person in the world, I'm not exactly where I want to be in life, but I am much happier than I would have been chasing after a steady office job or some kind of consulting firm. Has it cost me a lot? Sure. But I've also gained so much more because of my love and passion for music. I've gained a deeper understanding of myself, deeper understanding of the world, some of my best friends, and the greatest memories of my life I attribute to music in some way. Now that I do have a deeper understanding of myself and ADHD and how my brain is just wired differently, I have a bigger appreciation for my love of music and where it comes from, for how my brain is wired to be so passionate about music and to stem. I've ended up calling songs or sounds that stem me my happy ears moments, and I even have a full playlist on my Spotify just full of songs that either have sounds or the entire songs make me stem, called my Happy Engineers playlist. I'll even link it down below for anyone who's curious about that. Whereas I used to shy away from my intense passion, I'm full on embracing it now. It's just who I am, it's never gonna go away, I love this about myself. And I can't wait to make videos about it and share with y'all some great music, some great tunes. Exploring and explaining some of these artists and songs that give me happy ears moments, because they're so much fun to talk about. I'm not always the most eloquent with words, I don't wax poetic like a lot of music critics do. At Blackbird, a lot of how I describe music or what I love about music is based in my synesthesia that I didn't know I had until I went to Blackbird. I don't see colors when I hear music. I see pictures. I have image-based synesthesia. I don't know if that's a definable condition or not, but I have it. I once told an established engineer at Blackbird that mics on a piano sounded like the shiny part of banana vanilla pudding.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
So that's what you're gonna get with these kind of videos. But that's gonna be it for me. Thanks for watching. If you have any band or song recommendations, put them down in the comments. I can't wait to check them out. If you haven't heard it from anyone else today, I love you. Love and peace.